Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 226. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune to let people get into the stream who want to listen to it, etc.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new gods sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made vain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to this, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come thou to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with give or wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
And that was the excellent Chris Gard. Do go and check out his fine YouTube channel if you like good music, some of which is also contemporary. It's a good channel. Good evening to my guests, Hitman and Mitch. I have invited a couple of other people. We shall see if they turn up. How are you going this evening, gentlemen?
Oh, I'm okay, thank you, other than the Middle East again turning itself into a war zone.
I did notice. Yes, I'm sure we're gonna talk about that. How are you going this evening, Mitch?
Same old, but I slight irritation from some debate this week about how the women and children policy somehow some gay off or something. Like, I saw some people on Twitter having an argument about the women and children policy.
Yes. I saw Adam posted something about it in the Discord, didn't he?
Yeah, because there was one guy called Roman Helmet guy who posted about how the suffragettes hated that policy because it said it screwed over their feminism and whatnot. And then a couple of days later, like some people now started having arguments about how, oh well, actually, if you get a bunch of men on a ship that's sinking, those men will screw over the women and children to get a lifeboat. And I just think, no,
wasn't what traditionally happened, Mitch. I can tell you that for a fact. Look, I worked on tourist sailing boats, like quite big tourist sailing boats, 70 feet, quite a few years ago now in Australia. And our skipper was very, very clear that if anything happened to the vessel, it was women and children first, then male passengers, and only after that was it the crew. And that was 12 years ago, say. So women and children first is absolutely the traditional policy, and it certainly was in the 19th century. I mean, you can look at Titanic, where vastly more women were saved than men. You can look at things like the Birkenhead troop ship disaster, where the women and children were got off, and most of the soldiers on the troop ship were not. They stood there and drowned.
I mean, that's where it started, the Birkenhead drill.
I wouldn't say it was where it started. I think it was always a tradition. I mean, don't forget that was in the 1840s. I believe.
About that,
52.
Yeah.
But that's what really sort of made it a cultural thing, though, I think.
I don't know. Yeah. I think it was always the case that if you had a passenger ship, you got your women and children off first, and then it was the male passengers, and only then was it the crew. That was always the traditional way of doing it, and really officially it still is, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a disaster involving a French ship called the La Bourgogne, where the women and children were discarded by the male sailors who all saved themselves. And so on the ship disaster, all the women and children pretty much died. And that's why in this country we adopted the whole women and children policy as an explicit moral standard to have.
I think it was, look, I'm not going to speak for every nation in the world, obviously, but in terms of Britain and the old Commonwealth, it was very much the policy that you did women and children first, and it was considered a disgrace if you didn't.
Yeah, there was a case of a Japanese fella who survived the Titanic, and he was roundly shat upon by the rest of his society for years for not dying aboard that ship. Because at that time, the Japanese were very much influenced by us, by Anglo-Saxon ethics regarding morality and so on. And because this Japanese fella survived, where there were some women and children who died, this Japanese fella had to live forever ashamed, supposedly, even though he was a master of, he was given, because he was working for Japanese intelligence, looking at the Russian railway system, and he was told, well, look, you get yourself back home regardless of what happened.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. But then he would have also had pressure from the Japanese Bushido system as well, so he was probably doubly hit,
I think with the Birkenhead,
that makes sense.
With the Birkenhead stuff, I think also because then you've got the imagery of just how all the soldiers they just stood fast to attention, just real dedication and bravery in like knowing they're going to die. They just stand ready, sort of.
Well, they did, to be fair, they didn't all die. Some of them did manage to get on wreckage and what have you, and but most of them did. Yes,
I mean, it was shark-infested water too. No,
yes, the waters around South Africa are noted for sharks. That's very true.
It's like the survivors had to hear them once the ships finally did sink, like just being eaten by these sharks and stuff.
All right. Yeah, no, that was an interesting point. But as I say, traditionally, it's the case that you do women and children first, and then even then you do male passengers before you do the crew. The crew ask to get off, and the officers should get off after the men. That's the traditional way of doing it. In fact, traditionally speaking, on a Royal Navy ship, it's the captain who leaves last.
Do you remember the Costa Concordia, that big cruise ship that ran aground in Italy, I think?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? The captain was one of the first people off the boat.
Yes.
he got a lot.
Wouldn't have done for a British captain.
He got a lot of flack for that.
Yeah, it wouldn't have done for a British captain at all. Traditionally on a warship, especially the skipper is the last guy who gets off. But I mean, on any vessel, really, the skipper should be the last guy who gets off.
Yeah.
I don't know. The women and children rule makes sense to me. It just does.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's also much more honourable.
Mm-hmm.
But as always, I'm going to start us off. I mean, we can come back to this if people want to, but I'm going to start off by asking people if they have a first subject for this evening, and I'm going to ask Hitman first, just because I'm going clockwise. So, Hitman, did you have a first subject for this evening? And I suspect it might be something that people are already talking about in chat.
Yes, war in the Middle East. So yeah, Israel and Iran are throwing rockets at each other. Fun.
What a surprise.
Yeah,
I'm only mainly concerned that the RAF don't get involved, because the last time Iran sent drones and rockets at Israel, they were scrambling RAF jets from the Crown bases in Cyprus, which
I think
Starmer hasn't yet gone away.
No,
sorry.
I think Starmer today did say that he's planning on sending more jets over to the Middle East.
Well, I mean, if he doesn't give away any more British territory, I mean,
I know, right?
We're going to talk about Gibraltar in a bit, by the way, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Caravaggio in the chat says the RAF is already involved.
Yeah,
bloody surprise.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
What a surprise!
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take this opportunity, because you had an argument with someone about because we have a lot of defence agreements, but we don't treat it like we do with Israel, where for some reason we just send RAF fighter pilots to shoot down Iranian missiles. Well, apparently we don't. I don't know if you want to nip that one in my bud.
Well, look, in general terms, Britain has defence agreements with like scores of countries, way over 100, all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, they are pretty minor things. We have a defence agreement with Israel, but for some reason, that seems to require the RAF to defend Israel, which is ridiculous. I mean, Britain's got defence agreements with countries like Botswana and Borneo and Malaya and you name it. We've got defence agreements with them, but there aren't RAF jets there actively defending them for some strange reason.
I have a quick question. Has Israel ever sent any of its fighter jets to help us?
No.
Oh, that's strange.
Simply no. The only time that Britain has been officially allied with Israel was in 1956.
Yeah.
Which we talked about on our history stream last week. So,
and the any time that anyone of the Jewish faith has served en masse in our armed forces was World War II, and after that they all buggered off to Israel.
Yeah. One thing I'd mention, so some people on the voice are saying that, we created Israel as out of some big-minded Zionist plot or whatever. The thing was, Arthur Balfour was quoted as saying that essentially he created the state of Israel, or helped his declaration rather, because he noticed a lot of Zionist lobbies and whatnot, and he wanted to solve the Jewish issue at the time by just sending all the Jews to Israel. Like, he just wanted to just send all the Jews back to what used to be called Judea. That was
that's correct.
It's also a fact that certainly until about the 1980s, British foreign policy was traditionally pro-Arab. certainly until the 1980s, and in some respects later than that, but certainly up until then, British foreign policy was traditionally pro-Arab, not pro-Israeli. If you look at the 1967 Middle Eastern War, the Jordanians had the latest British chieftain tanks. The Israelis did not. Even though the Israelis wanted to buy them, the British government refused to sell them to them. They did, of course, have British Centurions from much earlier, which they used for many years in upgraded versions. But in general terms, British foreign policy was pro-Arab. I mean, look at Hitman's avatar, which is Glubb Pasha, who was a British officer who was in charge of the Arab Legion in 1948.
Well, one thing I would say to be a bit more nuanced, Iron Duke, is that Britain's policy in the early 20th century was a bit muddled, because you had those who were pro-Zionist, such as people like, Lord Rothschild and Balfour, and also Lord Milner. But you also have also Leopold Amory, for obvious reasons, and then you have cynical imperialists who just want to exploit Zionism to throw out the British Empire, because many people wanted to annex Palestine purely to buttress the right flank of the Suez Canal for defense purposes. And then you have Arabists like Glubb, for example, who just wanted to believe that supporting Arab interests would support British interests. So it was a bit of a convoluted mess, really. And regarding this idea of being pro-Arab, again, looking at the parties is interesting, because today both parties, Tories and Labour and even Reform, are very pro-Israel, though there's on the Labour left, there's a very strong Palestine influence. But back in the day, it was very different. You maybe should know that many of the older Labour MPs were actually Jews, so there was a very strong Zionist influence over Labour, and the Tories. Yes. And the Tories, including people like Anthony Eden, who had studied Arabic, were actually much more Arab aligned. So it's interesting how things play out in the long term, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Labour MPs like Emmanuel Shinwell, for example. But you did always get a certain number of Christian Zionist types. I mean, that nutcase British officer Ord Wingate, the guy who founded the Chindits in Burma, who was a bit eccentric, shall we say, at least.
Yeah, I mean, he served with the Haganah in the 1930s against the Palestinian insurgency. I mean, he wanted to bloody set up a Gideon force to, wage reprisals on the Arabs. Yeah, he was always because he was raised as a
he was a very strange character. I mean, he basically. He was basically supporting Jewish terrorists in the 1930s. And then, of course, he was supporting Haile Selassie against the Italians in the early stages of World War II. And then he raised the Chindits. And the Chindits were wonderful soldiers, but his casualty rates were enormous because of his bad planning. Wingate was a very strange character, to say the least. But he was the exception. It was much more common for British officers to be, as you say, Arabists for the most part.
Yeah, I know the King of Jordan is half British, so you'd think of like Jordan as being more a natural ally in that neck of the woods. I mean, you got Oman, where I think it was someone like Ralph Fiennes or someone like that. I think it was something like, I can't remember, one of the Fiennes family or someone else. Acting family who had an uncle who served in the SAS, helping the Omani monarchy during the Gulf Rebellion. So it's kind of like, I'm now in that neck of the woods. Like, you do have a lot of Anglophile Arab aristocrats and that kind of people. So, if anything, it just shows you stupid how, for example, even like someone you have Richard Tice and Nigel Farage, who are massively pro-Israel, at a time when, because Nigel Farage often talks a big game about how big he's on TikTok. Well, TikTok is mostly just for Zoomers who just don't like Israel for a whole list of reasons. So it just strikes me as a bit iffy, because it's not just about like in America, you've got boomer evangelicals, although the Zoomer evangelicals are completely different. They don't like Israel. So it's literally just, once the boomers are gone, that's it. Israel, the philo-Semitism to do with Israel and whatnot, dies out. And over here, we're not known for having a pro-Israel caucus or anything like that. So it just strikes me as weird.
I would just say that if you're a watcher of our history streams on Wednesday, I've already got planned a couple of streams with Hitman, one of which will be about Britain in Aden in the late 1960s, and another of which will be about Oman and Britain in Oman in the 60s and 70s. So if you're interested in this subject, there's a couple of, it won't be this week. This week we're going to be doing Waterloo, by the way, because it's Waterloo Day on Wednesday. But in the future, we've got a couple of streams about Britain in the Middle East coming up, which will address these issues, shall we say.
It is interesting, this switch to Israel, because, and like how that happened and like when, because it's like until quite recently, like you've been saying, we sort of had more dealings with the Arab world. I mentioned last time one of my cousins in the 80s, he was he'd been brought over by the Sultan of Oman to help run their armed forces. And it's like that's just the 80s. That wasn't a long time ago, right? And yeah, just all of a sudden, all of those links just seem dead now. It's just how did that suddenly happen?
According to Aaron, and I believe him because British politics is Aaron's specialization. And Aaron's not joining us this evening, by the way, folks, because he's drinking with his mates, and I don't blame him. Yeah, according to Aaron, whose specialization is British politics, it was really in the 1980s under Mrs. Thatcher that British policy began to change. So yeah, I've no reason to disbelieve him because Aaron has a much greater interest in that stuff than I do.
Well, just to elaborate, it's probably worth thinking that obviously Thatcher did a big pivot towards America with Reagan, and obviously Reagan being kind of the sort of proto-neocon. Because I know that around that time in the 80s, you've obviously got Israel, and you've got the 1982 Lebanon War, where they full-on invade the country, and the Americans send their Marines in to try and stabilize things. And yeah,
that did big. Well, we sent troops there as well to Lebanon. I mean, and I remember them getting in gun barrels. So yeah,
and then they all got blown up by Hezbollah, and then we all pulled out. So
yeah, a load of American Marines got killed, didn't they? Yes, I remember.
And of course,
I remember because I remember during the election, I was talking to this one guy in Reform. He was used to work as an army surveyor, and he worked in all over the place, including in Libya, where he worked alongside the Italian fella in Libya, and apparently one thing about it was because apparently in Libya, this was before Lockerbie, where about that time there was a lot of respect, also a lot of Anglophilia among Gaddafi and his lot, and then Lockerbie happened, and then he went over all over the place. I think Israel was the only country he didn't work in because for some reason Israel was the only country in the Middle East that refused to hire British surveyors. I can't remember what it was, but yeah.
Well, there were British troops in Libya until certainly into the 1950s. There were British troops in Libya.
One intervention I will quickly make about Lockerbie is that turned out to be Hafez al-Assad, the president of Syria, not Libya, but Gaddafi claimed responsibility for that because he wanted the notoriety.
Yeah, makes sense. Didn't do him a lot of favors, I would say. But I mean, getting rid of Gaddafi didn't do us a lot of favors, or the Americans. So,
the point is that Gaddafi wanted to be this Arab bad boy amongst all the Arab nations, so that's why he claimed responsibility for all these terror attacks in the West, even though they weren't Libya.
Didn't some of the terrorists get training in Libya though?
That I'm not sure, but all I know is that broadly speaking, most of these terror attacks in the West were actually Syria and not Libya. But again, Gaddafi claims responsibility because he wanted the notoriety.
Yeah.
And even though we had intelligence that confirmed it was Syria, the source of the training and the resources, and not Libya, we went along with it anyway because it suited us to make Syria, the bad guy. Because again, the Syrians were supporting, they had troops in Lebanon during the Lebanese civil war and were fighting against Israel. So because we were closing up to Israel, it suited us to have Syria be the bad guy and not Libya.
Yeah, interesting. Hitman, what's your opinion on the current missile exchanges and what have you?
Well, it's just same old. I was talking to my friend Hunger in private DMs, and basically my view is that the current Iranian regime and the current Israeli regime are a bit like the Tory and Labour Party in the country. The two corpses propping up each other, and so once one collapses, the other will collapse as well. And so all of this is just to keep them, add a few more years to their life expectancy, because they know that they're never going to escalate things to where you could consequently see a fall of a regime, because as soon as one of them fall, the other one's going to go as well. And so many people, there are a lot of people, even Cringe Walker on Twitter, saying that, Iran is probably, he even said he thinks Iran's regime is going to fall in the next month, but Israel's will then fall within the next year. And I said, I don't think that's unrealistic. However, I don't see the Iranian regime going while Khomeini's still alive, because again, he is one of the big original supporters of the original Ayatollah of Supreme Leader Khomeini, and was president of the country from 1981 to 1989, and was the chosen successor of the original Ayatollah. He's got too much links to the original revolutionary spirit that I just don't see Iran going against him or the regime while he's still alive. However, once he's dead, I do think all bets are off, because there definitely are tensions there.
Yeah, they don't seem totally popular, do they? I think there's quite a lot of civilian resistance to the Iranian regime.
I mean, I don't.
I'm sorry.
I'll let Mitch go.
I was just going to scratch your point and go, because one thing I have to see every time there's something happening in the Middle East, my Twitter feed always gets at least a few mentions of a Pahlavi dynasty. And it's just like, because the Pahlavi dynasty, they seem quite a bit captured by the neocons in Washington and a lot of that lobby. So I don't know what you'd make of that dynasty these days happening. Hitman. So.
Well, the Pahlavi dynasty are interesting because under the Pahlavis, especially with the second Shah, the last Shah of Iran, and Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, there was actually an alliance between Israel and Iran, because there were, if you think about it, there's natural reasons to. Iran and Israel both had beef with the Arabs, so it made sense for them to have an alliance against the Arabs, and they shared information and technology with each other. And in fact, even after the Iranian Revolution, Israel kept supporting Iran, because the Israelis and Iran both saw a mutual enemy in Saddam Hussein. And, Israel sent weapons and technology to Iran. And even most notably, in, I think it was 1980, Israel carpet bombed Iraq's nuclear facilities that had been built by the French, because they didn't want them getting a nuclear bomb. So, again, and today, if you ask any, Israeli or Iranian government official about this, they'll deny it, saying, "Oh no, we've never collaborated with those guys, never." But it's true. There's actually photo evidence of Israel sending weapons to Iran.
I can believe that. Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, the Israelis also were involved in backing the Islamic State to some degree, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were exactly, because they want to destabilize Syria. Because again, any neighbors where they can destabilize and then encroach on their territory, the better.
Remember those pictures of the of ISIS and stuff, having all these new American rifles and stuff? Wonder where they got them.
Yeah, indeed.
Yes,
just to go back to the Pahlavi dynasty, one other thing that's important to understand why the revolution happened is, well, as people know, I've been doing a series on my channel with my friend Hunger about modern Iran, and in Iranian history, you really get this kind of pivot between conservative, orthodox sort of Shia Islam and then like what I'm going to call Persian like degeneracy. So you have a period where the Ulama are dominant. It's all about banning alcohol, banning poetry, banning any kind of like fun. and then you'll have a period where the Shah's like, we need some cultural economic flourishing, and then you'll get like poetry readings, people drinking wine and alcohol. You'll get even people taking things like opium, and even homosexuality to be believed. So you just get this constant pivot between one versus the other, and that's a constant feature of Iranian history and politics, in modern Iran especially. And with the revolution, the Shah, one of his accomplishments is that yes, Iran's economy massively modernized and people's standards of living significantly rose, but the problem is that the Pahlavis are modernists, are secularists. They very much sidelined the ulama, the traditional clergy of the country, and this is concept in Iranian history, the idea of good religion and bad religion, which is that good religion is when the monarchy and the religious authorities are working in tandem, and bad religion is when the monarchy abandons the religious authorities. And this is, again, seems very prescient when you're looking at the Pahlavi dynasty, because, again, these modern secularists didn't care about the interest of the ulama. They just wanted, line go up and a cultural hollowing out. And there was still this sentiment about the foreign exploitation. You used the word Anglo-Persian, and these American companies extracting all the oil wealth, and a lot of the resentment against the Shah's autocratic regime. That ultimately, because that's another thing that's interesting, is that when the revolution happened, it wasn't necessarily that people wanted an Islamic Republic. Everybody just wanted the Shah gone. So once he was gone, it was kind of fair game. And Khomeini was this very charismatic figure who had expressed opposition to the Shah, and he had been exiled in the 60s and spent many years in Iraq, and then later moved off to Paris for a bit before returning. And he was able to be the most organized of the potential opposition, and he was able to consolidate this Islamic Republic. And people to this day think the Islamic Republic is some aberration in Iranian history, but in my opinion, once you really understand the history, it's less an aberration as you would think, considering the course of modern Iranian history.
I would
AI.
say
I was just going to say, AI. Good evening, and what's your views on this?
on the Israel-Iran lobbing missiles at each other. Well, I'm praying to Mars that he will return Vespasian to us. But so far, yeah, I mean, it's I think this is the long term is that it's about dragging the West into war with Iran, and it's not about nuclear weapons or who has nuclear weapons or what have you. It's about regime change in Iran. And I did a stream with Hitman not so long ago. We looked at the current crown prince of Iran and his backing and his allies in the West and everything. So I imagine if there wasn't ever an attempt to fill a vacuum, if the regime does is brought down, I reckon he'd be the guy that they would want to install, and their guys along with it. But at this moment in time, the problem that you got, and I know Netanyahu did that speech yesterday where he was encouraging the Iranian people to resist, to rise up, and he was being very cordial, and also like invoking Cyrus, the relationship of the Persians and the Jews back to Cyrus the Great, and as like these great allies and what have you.
Bit of an exaggeration, but okay.
there's a few missing details in that relationship, but
yes, indeed.
yeah, the point, the point is, I believe that this would blow back in Israel's face, because if Iran, and there are definitely signs that the regime in Iran is not as strong as it was 40 years ago. But if they have an external threat attacking them, which is from their point of view, it could actually rally the Iranian people around the regime if they're, under attack.
This is what Hitman was saying just before you joined us. Hitman was saying that the Iranian regime and the Netanyahu's regime in Israel are kind of propping each other up to some degree, and that if one of them goes, the other one will probably go as well. So yeah.
And another thing to understand with Iran is, for several hundred years, so from the proclamation of the Safavid dynasty in 1501 until the Pahlavis came in, one of the formal names for Iran was the guarded domains of Iran. So they have this kind of permanent siege mentality. In fact, I even quote reading something Morgoth said and quoted him saying, the Iranians have this idea that their country is some, walled garden paradise that shields off barbarians around them. And so, again, this is perfectly incongruent, with the long stretch of Iranian history and culture. And to expect them just to, keel over just because you throw through missiles at them is ridiculous.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean the whole identity from the the Parthians, the Sassanids, to the Iranian intermezzo, the rise of the Islamic Iranian dynasties in that region has always factored in the Arabs to the west, the Greeks and the Arabs to the west, and the Turks to the east.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. Does anyone have anything to add on this before we move on to another subject?
Some people are getting very excited about this, but it is just throwing missiles at each other. So
yeah, and they've been doing that for quite a while now.
Yeah, nothing's going to happen.
This is not a new thing.
No.
Yeah, well, I hope not. To be honest,
Yeah,
I do. As I said, the thing I don't like is the RAF getting involved in it, because I don't want to see British lads getting killed in a war that's not going to do us any good. Basically.
But unless Jordan and Iraq get involved, there's no risk of any territorial loss on either side, and you can't have a proper war then if no one's going to actually lose anything. Like you smash up some of their facilities or whatever, big deal. They can be rebuilt, and you kill some generals. Well, these are Middle Eastern generals. They're not exactly the best. Just stick anyone in the role, they're all going to do the same. So, nothing. I can't see much really coming from this.
What I will add, though, is some individuals have been claiming that Iran's missiles struck the US embassy, because what's interesting is that in all of this, America's kind of saying, well, Israel and Iran can kind of duke it out. We're here on the sidelines. We're only interested in making sure that American troops don't get hurt, which seems like a sensible policy. And these people claiming that, Iran has struck the US embassy, America must get involved, is a total lie, because the missiles were aimed at Tel Aviv and the US embassy's in Jerusalem, because that's America recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital, not Tel Aviv, and that's why it's just not in Tel Aviv.
This is true. Yeah, the most they could have hit in Tel Aviv would have been a consulate.
Like Netanyahu's first message was it Rising Lion, Operation Rising Lions or something? You could tell it was clearly aimed at America, really. Yeah, it's just all sort of, it's in English. He's sort of talking about New Jersey and stuff and trying to get sympathy from US. Like, that was the main point of it. Like America, because it's trying to talk tough. But are you really tough when you're just asking America to come help?
Also,
I just hope Trump decides to stay out of it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Wasn't there that story a while back about how Trump had fallen out with him to the point where he just wasn't returning phone calls or something? So,
it's tricky.
Yeah. I don't think Trump wants a serious foreign war at the moment. I really don't.
No. One thing I will also add is that fundamentally, it's one other thing you have to understand with Iran is that Iran though it's Islamic, it is Shia, it is not Sunni, and that is incredibly important because the Shia have this long-running conflict with Sunni Muslims. You know, it goes all the way back to the early days of Islam, and it's just interesting, isn't it, that this Iran was founded by the Safavids. It was founded explicitly as a Shia, almost a Shia revolutionary state that was going to wage this grand Shia jihad against the Sunni heretic. And look at Iran now; its greatest religious conflict is with a Jewish state and not with any Sunni state. It's funny how things play out, isn't it?
I mean, there is still the idea in all of Islam of the Ummah, though. And then it's like, we'll deal with all the non-Muslims, and then we'll start killing each other to find out which is the right Islam.
Well, I mean, you say that. It's important to remember that when the Safavid Empire allied with the European powers against the Ottomans because they were mutual enemies. So again, this idea that Iran is not prepared to work with the West to serve its own interests is not anathema.
No, yeah.
Well, the thing is, just to add to what Mitch has said about Islam, one of the reasons Shah Ismail, the founder of the Safavid dynasty, adopted Shia Islam is that he wanted to give Iran a unique cultural identity. He wanted to keep it distinct from the Ottomans or any other people. And again, because it just shows how conscious the Persians are, Iranians are of their own identity. Fine, we're going to be, if we're Muslim, we're going to have our own brand of Islam. We're not going to be, Sunni.
The only thing I would add to this, and I've seen someone talking about this in the chat, there are rumors that an Israeli F-35 got shot down, and the F-35 is supposedly a stealth jet, which it is from the front anyway. But on the other hand, it's said that the Iranians have now got Russian S-400 very long-range anti-aircraft missiles. And if that's the case, then, it's not going to be safe flying over Iran, even for F-35s. So,
One thing I will say, though, is I've heard grumblings that Putin may throw Iran under the bus for the sake of securing Ukraine, but we'll see.
Makes some sense. Tharium, did you have a first subject for this evening?
Could maybe talk about the general riots going on America and Northern Ireland. Just the summer rioting seems to have started kicking off.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. We'll start with the Americans as they started first. So I think it all started with ICE starting to do some raids in Los Angeles, and then they were detained, and they were locked in a building, I think, was the first thing that kicked it off. And then it all suddenly starts boiling over from there with these paid for immigrant. Well, no. There's a bunch of because LA is full of illegal immigrants and Mexicans, and they all start then kicking off, going, "This is our land, actually." And then so Trump orders in the National Guard, try and quell things, and all spirals out from there. And it's very reminiscent of the George Floyd stuff. You got them burning everything down, the media going, "Oh, look, these people just want to peacefully watch some cars burning. How did the cars get on fire? We're not going to talk about that. Don't worry." And this is wild though, because of course, like the January 6th stuff was all insurrection stuff, but people waving foreign flags in America going, "This is now Mexico." That's not an insurrection, apparently. That's a peaceful protest. Oh, and the Mexican president also backing them, going, we will back you against the United States. Wild stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking with that. You have, for example, I think it was Minnesota, where apparently a Democrat.
Yeah, that just happened. Yeah.
Melissa Hortman, I believe her name was. She voted against giving illegal immigrants free healthcare or something, and she got killed off by one of these insane leftists.
Yeah,
So
it's tricky. He does. It is likely he was leftist because this stuff they've also started in the right of these they're calling them the No Kings protest, which is just anti-Trump leftist crap. And he apparently had loads of these flyers in his car, so it's likely he's part of this. And you know how insane leftists are. It's like if you're not sufficiently anti-Trump to their own side, then they're the enemy. So it's likely he was also some sort of leftist. And
I find it very strange that these people who are complaining about being shipped back to Mexico are waving Mexican flags. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
well, this is a bit of a they wanted to. So you have a group among the Hispanics called La Raza, which means the race. Their whole objective is literally take all those areas that Polk had taken off the Mexicans in 1848. The Mexicans don't want all of that land back. So you take California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, etc. They want all that land back. That's why they're all waving Mexican flags. It's literally they identify Mexico. And they want to annex.
I hope they're not holding their breath because I don't think they're going to get it back. But okay.
Well, I mean, as Farium said about how Texas was not inhabited by the Mexicans at all because the Comanche were too much of a threat for them, and then 30,000 Texans were able to settle the land, and well, they made a
30,000 Anglo-Americans. We could do it. Where the Spanish and Mexicans.
I've been reading before all this kicked off, guys. I was reading a book by this. He passed away back in 2017, but he was this American. I guess you could say I think he described himself like an anarchist, libertarian, then paleocon. He was a bit of a mix and match. He was like a professor at Southern University of California, but also wrote for the San Francisco Chronicle, I think it was. And he had his name was Kevin Starr, and he had like this famous like sort of public spat with that Harvey Milk, that gay Democrat councilman who is sort of like used as a pinnacle for the civil rights movement and everything, and also like a big proponent of noncery in his personal life. Now, the Kevin Starr, he wrote this book on the history of California, and if I'm absolutely honest, I call him like the last American exceptionalist when he talks about California. He acknowledges, the California itself was settled by it was Spanish missionaries. It was missionaries that settled there. It wasn't directly to the and it was laid claim by the Viceroy of New Spain. After but like Texas, it was hardly populated by any Spanish. It was only they had like they called a rancho system, which was basically just like a farming settlement, you could say. But it was only in the San Francisco Bay Area. The rest of California was just unoccupied, apart from Indian tribes. And when Mexico got its independence, because of the regimes in Mexico were secular, liberal, and weren't in some cases indifferent to the missionary system, California and what's now New Mexico, Arizona, and co. We were just left we're just left by the Mexican regime. That nothing really changed there, and like in Texas, they started inviting Anglos into California, and because it was a liberal regime, they didn't originally under Spain. They enforced Catholicism. They didn't enforce it later on under Mexico. and of course you had a rebellion. Rebellion similar to that in Texas wasn't as successful, but you had a rebellion nonetheless. But at its heart, California, in its modern inception, was founded by white Anglo Protestants. At its heart, that's what founded it. The bear itself. Apart from that, it's just a Spanish outpost. It really is just a Spanish outpost.
Sorry, AI. I was just going to say I like Caravaggio's comment that
very
I
true,
put on the screen here, because he's entirely correct, of course.
I mean, actually, just to give a bit of context here, Apostolic Majesty put it best on Twitter. He said there were more Boers on the Great Trek. There were more farmers on the Great Trek, Europeans on the Great Trek, than there were Mexicans or Spanish in, California, New Mexico, Arizona, or Texas at that time.
I could believe that.
I mean, I'd say Spain, if you're going to go on like who has rights to the land, I'd say Spain has a better claim on California than Mexico does. Given that it was 25 years, Mexico actually held it.
I mean, I still say that it's actually British territory because
of course,
English
yes.
territory. So Francis Drake, landing there, that's a clear indication of the the claim to the land there. I mean, bloody hell! I think the Russians have even probably a better claim than the Mexicans in some regards.
And it was just saying, the idea that Mexicans are somehow indigenous to the Americas is a funny one. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she does this. Like, we're the indigenous people. Where did that name Cortez come from exactly? That's not some Comanche name.
Yeah, it's not really a Comanche name. This is very true.
I mean, there are some other interesting ethnic claims she makes, though.
Oh, she makes some interesting claims. They don't seem to have a great deal of connection to reality, but yes, okay.
One thing I'd say, there's also even wilder is the sort of like treating they'll treat like black people like they're the same as like the native Indians, and I don't know how they come up with that. So in some groups, just wild that.
It is a bit strange. Mitch, did you have anything you wanted to say about this subject?
In regards to America versus Mexico, I would just feel I just have to ask the question: why isn't Trump just copied from Mexico by now?
Yeah.
I can't say I've ever met any Mexicans, but it's weird how much I can actually just dislike the Mexicans intensely because of how they behave regarding all these illegals and whatnot.
Yeah, I was talking to a German guy I know about this, and he's quite a lefty, but I was pointing out, whenever us, like the English or the Germans, go somewhere, we'd never behave like these Mexicans are. They'll just be wild to us. But for some reason, that's just what they do.
Yeah.
It was.
You were, Therium, you were going to also talk about the stuff going on in Ireland, I believe.
Yeah. So this has kicked off too. And this is an interesting one because seems to be a couple of gypsy lads, foreign Romanian gypsies, tried to rape a 14-year-old girl. And actually, I think there's 3 recent events, but it was just this one that kicked everything off, and people just got sick of it, and they've been quite fiery in their response, going around because it's a really small town. I think it's only about 30,000 people, and they've been going around and targeting houses of these immigrants, and some houses have been burnt down. Police have obviously come in. There's fighting there. Saw some Filipino immigrants there pointing on their houses, putting up things going, "We're Filipinos," because they haven't been a problem. So it's all, yeah. It's another sort of just thing of just the anger boiling up everywhere. Really, with all this.
I also heard from it was some chap on YouTube who was an Ulsterman who was also like there covering it. Now one of the locals claimed, and I have no way of proving this, but wouldn't be surprised that landlords in Ballymena, where the main body of this riot has been taking place, and this explains why certain buildings and properties were targeted by the crowds, was that landlords had hiked the rent for the natives there, for the Irish and the Ulster people there, and to basically so they couldn't pay, forcing them to go, and then allowing multi-oc, families of immigrants. I don't know if some Roma, probably others, different groups, to then move in, and this has also caused. This is also possibly one of the reasons why that health centre, which was also used for housing migrants, was targeted as well. The media will tell you that this was just random acts of thuggery, but there was that's why people on the ground was justifying their actions because of that. Now, whether you agree with that, that's a different matter altogether. But I mean, at the end of the day, whenever you have rioting or public disorder on this scale, conventional wisdom has always been that this is just a sign of bad governance. That the elites aren't governing properly. They are rotten to the core, and this is why I've talked about this on the stream before, but like if you look at the build up to the storming of the Bastille and what the French Revolution and that period, France and particularly around Paris would regularly have like civil disorder. It was frequent until it got to that point where there was a change. Also, I don't know, and I have a suspicion, I wouldn't be surprised, particularly in Northern Ireland, if some of this has been coordinated by the paramilitaries there as well.
Like Jack has, Mitch has mentioned, the whole immigrants problem in Ireland and Northern Ireland is uniting both the Catholics and Protestants, which is quite incredible to see, really.
Yeah, the whole thing is just a big example of why you shouldn't battery farm like the worst dregs of the third world into Northern Ireland of all places, where where most of the people there can still remember when bombs were going off on the Shankill Road or whatever.
Yeah, there was. I remember a couple of years ago now. I think there was. It was in one border town in Scotland, where the locals. It was all quite covered up, reporting of it, but the locals burnt down a couple of houses that belonged to some of these county line running drug dealers, and this is sort of getting into what happens when people lose faith in the state, that they start taking stuff into their own hands. Always, I saw recently some new groups set up called "We Are the Shield," I think, and they're going around and they're sort of. It's in Northumberland at the moment, and they're starting it's a phone line that's always on that you can call if you're being harassed by any of the newcomers, and they'll try and send some group of lads out to come help you. And this is everything that the state really hates, because any sort of, even if it's just cleaning up stuff like graffiti, that makes the state look really bad. So, and I think we're going to see a lot more of this, really, just people taking everything into their own hands.
Yeah, I totally agree, Tharim. It sounds like a good thing, but on the other hand, I have to make it clear, because we're on YouTube, which is not a free speech place. We in no way on this channel support any form of violence whatsoever from anybody. So yeah, but I do agree with you. I mean, and this is obviously going to happen more often, for sure. Did anyone else have anything to say about this subject? AI or Hitman? I don't think you've said much about this.
Other than, America should have done what Polk wanted. They should have just annexed northern Mexico and kept them on some reservation there.
Indeed. AI, did you have anything to add? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there was in their last elections in Mexico, I think there was 60 candidates were murdered.
Oh yeah.
Place.
Wow.
And one thing I will say is there's all this talk about Trump wanting to annex Canada. Well, fucking invade Mexico and annex them.
Yeah.
That would have made more sense if you wanted to defend America, because Canadians are not exactly invading America, whereas you couldn't really say the same about Mexicans. So
I mean, if Mexico got a leader who wasn't obviously in the pay of the cartels, they could easily just ask America for help in just hunting them all down, all the cartels. I'm sure pretty much any president would go along with that.
Well, hasn't Trump already declared these cartels as terrorist groups? I believe he has.
Yeah. But it's still, even for America, he doesn't want to just invade Mexico basically to get him. But maybe we'll see after these riots and their politicians calling for action and saying, "Yeah, we will take this land back from you." Well, maybe I will invade now. Show them who's in charge.
Yeah, interesting. AI, did you have a first? Oh, sorry, Hitman, you carry on, man.
So one final point on this. I talked about Iran earlier, but I think Trump should just rename America to the guarded domains of America from the USA.
Interesting point. Unless anyone else says anything on this subject, Tharium, AI, did you have a subject for this evening?
I was going to bring up the, news today that Keir Starmer is said to bring forward a national inquiry, a public inquiry into the Pakistani grooming gangs. Something which I know nobody has any faith in. I can already see the results from this, and it's going to be, well, in my mind, it's going to be, they'll probably say some thing. It's down to failure of integration and multiculturalism, without getting to the realities of it. The judge will be, handpicked for it. And bearing in mind, and there's an interview on GB News with Stephen Edgington, with Dominic Cummings, and he asked him towards the end of the interview about the grooming gang stuff, and Cummings had this very interesting bit where he said that he saw during his time in Downing Street and in Whitehall a council, which I believe is a Labour council in Northern England, basically wanted one of the initial grooming gang reports to be covered up, and they went to Whitehall and to government to say, look, we need to have this so this covered up because it will trigger race riots or something like that, social disharmony and all that sort of stuff. And as a result, you had the Treasury and other people in certain departments were agreeing with the council that we need to sort of like cover this up, hush this up, so it can never see the light of day. And then you had others who were like, well, no, this needs to be looked in further because this is a huge problem. And the reason they wanted this looked into is because, for the very simple reason, they were worried with the violence, especially what they saw last year. And in the end, the government at the time took the stance that, well, no, this report has to be shown, and it was one of those reports that was in, I think, 2021. There's been so many now, but it was one. I think it was that report in 2021 that Cummings was referring to. But I mean, at its heart, as he said, the people in the system, the people in Whitehall, have no interest in investigating it, and will because bear in mind they will be the ones involved in this public national inquiry. They will be the ones to determine what is said, who is interviewed, who is brought before, because yes, then they will tell you that they have court summoning powers, which they will, and it will be contempt of court if someone is brought before and they lie deliberately. They will be to get themselves out of trouble. That would be classed as contempt of court, but they will not call people who are relevant. In reality, those people who are, I understand, I hate to say this, I understand why Pakistani people in this country would cover it up. I understand it from a group-based logic, even though it's incredibly evil. What I cannot forgive, though, is native Brits in the police, in council, in local government, in the NHS and social services, helping them cover this up. I want to see revenge. I don't want to see justice. I want to see righteous vengeance in the form of justice.
I will say I'm not supporting this for the sake of YouTube. I will just say if certain revelations come out with this inquiry, like to do with migrant hotels being epicenters of like potentially these gangs, we're going to get another safe port. Not from YouTube, we're not supporting it, but I can see that happening again this year because, I mean,
I believe the reason the reason Starmer's doing this report is they want to try, and someone just put it in the gaslight. They want to try and control the narrative to stop this happening. I think they know. I think they know that this summer, so far, I mean, look at Northern Ireland. So far, it's ripe. It's ripe for another
fiery summer. Fiery summer, yeah.
It's ripe.
All it takes is
if you do not stop both legal mass immigration and also the constant invasion of illegal immigrants across the channel, if you do not stop those things, then the situation is just going to get worse for sure. And that's no matter what government is in charge. And the fact that Starmer's government is particularly useless makes it worse. But whoever replaces Starmer, they're going to have to actually do something, not just talk.
Yeah, because they've got 4 years. They can't bank on it. Well, we've just got to wait out another few months. So they can't. They couldn't. And the other report, the inquiry you were thinking about, I think that's the one Sajid Javid did. I think. And I remember him saying beforehand, whatever the results, we'll publish them. Doesn't matter what happens. And then comes out and they've missed out like all the main Muslim areas. Funny that.
Yeah, very.
And then
very
all the papers run with majority of grooming gangs are actually white people. Yeah,
Sure they are.
Yeah, like,
you've been
yeah,
playing with that data a bit there.
yeah, Charlie
Well, I mean,
Peters
yeah.
did good work on it. He said Rotherham was only mentioned like twice in the entire report.
Yeah. I don't
And
think it was
there's absolute corruption in some of these Muslim-dominated areas in Britain. And not just councillors, police officers, all sorts of people. And unless any report brings that out, then it's going to be useless.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, isn't it just a case of the mafia investigates the mafia and finds the mafia's done nothing wrong?
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. That's what I fear about this. I mean, Nigel Farage seems to have totally walked away from his promise for reform to do an inquiry. He just seems to have totally walked away from that. I think Rupert Lowe said he's going to do one, but
Rupert Lowe is he's started one. It's already undergoing, and he's already found some stuff. He's saying he's written to Keir Starmer to cooperate with with this new one, which is good because he can provide whatever information like his stuff obtains, and then if Keir Starmer has been given this stuff and he's covered up, then that's a really just proof of damning that you can damn this cover up that Rupert can do.
I'll just be amazed if Starmer and Labour don't cover it up, frankly.
I
really will be.
But when you've got this counter one going on, it will make it harder for them to get away with covering it up, which is a good thing.
I'm pretty disappointed with Farage walking away from this when he made solemn public promises that Reform were going to organise this, and he just ignored it afterwards. After the council election, strange to say.
Remember his...
we're still waiting for the deportations policy of him.
Yeah.
We've got a PDF about it, which you can read.
Yeah.
And I put it in the Discord today.
He did, Nigel did say, I think he'd just forgotten all about it. I think when questioned one time about the promised immigration plan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, no.
I think he wants to grift his way to number 10 by, counter-signaling, the government's spending too much, or they're not properly British, we'll come in a few years and, we'll really fix things.
But he's ballsing it up. Like, he wants to make a foreign Muslim the face of the party. While saying, we're the nationalist party for all you nativists. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you've got to make a choice, in my opinion. And Farage, insofar as he's making a choice, is making the wrong one at the moment.
Without mentioning any names, there's one particular figure who has gone from, in the span of about a year, has gone from Britain, we must be governed by British people, like Brexit was. This is what Brexit was about. To actually, if it's okay if Britain was 95% African as long as they're Christian and play cricket, down to, and now he has gone down to. Actually, it's okay if it's we're governed by Muslims because it's meritocracy.
They just have to wave the flag. Doesn't matter who they are if they're waving the flag.
Yeah,
that's all that matters. Yeah.
And you see, if someone resides in Wales for 10 years, that makes them Welsh, right?
10.
Yeah.
Just 5.
5 or 10.
Five
he said,
is
actually.
Good.
Yeah. 5 years, and that makes you a Welshman. I've got to tell you, Nigel, there's a lot of my taffy mates who would not agree with that.
I remember the same person.
I might be helping for Farage a bit here, but I would say even not my answer I'd give, which would be white British people only, i.e. native Brits. Welsh people could complain and say, well, my take on it would lead to English people being able to take social housing in Wales of Welsh people. So I can understand Farage having somewhat a difficulty answering my question. But even then, yeah, I'm not going to run cover. He's not our guy on stuff like this. Right? He's just not.
It's like the civic nationalism that we all used to slag Sargon of Akkad for doing 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
He's where Sargon of Akkad was 10 years ago. Right?
I've
got my issues with Carl Benjamin because I still think he's basically a liberal. But he's come on a long way since then, and Farage is just, you know, the points that Carl Benjamin was coming out with in 2015 are still what Nigel Farage is talking about, and he's just way behind the public. He's way behind the British public.
Did you see that Dominic Cummings interview with Steve Edginson?
Yeah. They're stuck in the 90s. Yeah, bang on.
Like, that's the problem with Farage, is the fact that, so for example, the candidate I was helping in the last general election, I had a conversation with him. Like the first conversation I had with him was because it was just after Rishi Sunak with the D-Day thing, and I said to the guy, and I say it kind of casually, just do you think do you really think like Rishi Sunak is British like us? And so the guy was saying he's starting to think no. So he was just starting to get into our circles with his way of thinking after what Rishi Sunak had done about it then. And so that's the average reform punter. Like anecdotally, the fact that
can I just say to Darren Buckley in the chat, girls play shit cricket, mate, basically. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
I'll play cricket with women. I won't bother. Like, they can't even hold a cricket bat properly. But anyway, I look at Farage and I go, I mean, it's a matter of massively behind the curve. And so, I mean, Dominic Cummings is saying, people got Farage a bit behind. And it's like, it's one of those things where, can you really play any excuses for that mode nowadays? Because, you know, it's like, for example, he posted Remainer tears when he was going to like a reform pub.
Oh, yeah.
God. And hasn't that been a success, Mitch? I mean, hasn't Brexit been a success? Look at Northern Ireland. Look at the fact that we're still ruled by thousands of EU rules that we haven't got rid of.
Yeah,
you know, listen, I voted for Brexit and I fully supported it, and I've seldom been happier than when Brexit succeeded. But it's been totally wasted. And it's been wasted on purpose by the British establishment.
I will say this: so Ben Habib, for example, he got slagged off by a lot of reform people because he was talking about Northern Ireland in relation to Brexit and so on. And they said, okay, well, this is one reason we got rid of him, because he kept talking about Brexit at a time when people were just fatigued about it. But then you got Farage posting this about drinking Remainer tears, and they go, like, you know, I mean, it's not the same about David Bull, who's like talking about, you know, her immigration is a lifeblood of this country. It's just like,
their new chairman actually said immigration is the lifeblood of Britain, and Britain's always been a nation of immigrants. That's their new gay chairman.
In two separate
it's like the first interview, I thought, I just thought perhaps he misspoke some more because I couldn't find the full video anywhere. But then the second time, when it was later on GB News talking to Michelle Dewberry, and he just doubled down, and I thought, yeah, even like my local reform plans were just like, fuck it, you know. But remember, like, I saw some guys on Twitter saying we want Zia back. Should we Zia back? That's just.
But when the Muslim chairman's an improvement over your new gay chairman. God help us.
Have you ever noticed? I mean, have you ever noticed, like, whether it's in all aspects of society now, either you have a, like a normal, why I say normal, like social normal alien. Now he has his an alien culture, but he's like normal. And then whenever it's like a British person, it has to be either like a tranny, homosexual, or something like that. Have you ever noticed that? There's always like there has to be something odd about them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, someone in the chat was saying all he cares about is the media, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. But the media in Britain is a relatively small bubble of lefty liberals.
Yes.
And they have
GB
nothing
News
in common with the vast majority of the British people. Nothing.
Yeah,
But here's,
GB
here's the
News-
problem,
GB
though.
News.
They're powerful, though, and that's the problem.
Well, they have a loud voice. Powerful, loud voice. I guess that's the same thing. But they have a very loud voice.
Yeah.
But they're a very small bubble who have almost nothing in common with most of the ordinary people of Britain.
And Nigel
What
is
TV
in the
News?
position. Nigel is kind of in the position that Trump was in. He could, if he wanted, step over them and challenge them, but he doesn't have the balls for it.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. Look, I know Mitch has been much more in the past.
Yeah.
Has been much more supportive of reform than I have. So I just asked Mitch to say what he thinks about this.
I'll just say, firstly, so GB News gets more viewers than lots of Sky News and BBC on average. Like, so GB News, of course, being a platform is like very friendly to what, like, it's got guys like Charlie Peters and Matt Goodwin on regularly. It's kind of, well, there's no excuse for, the media will be not be nice to us. It's like, I can't get beyond that reason, especially in 2025 now. And secondly, I said in the Discord, because Farage was saying to IVTV News, he's going to bar people from standing for the Welsh elections if they oppose devolution. And I just thought, I'm stepping back thinking, right, bearing in mind that's just, I mean, UKIP were doing that like 10 years ago. And they still had representatives under Neil Hamilton when UKIP had long since scrapped off Gerard Batten. And even though they were declining, they still had some Welsh representatives because there was just that much of an anti-devolution sentiment. But it's also just the fact that Farage said pretty much, devolution is inevitable. Like he just treated it as, it's done. It's a done deal. We just have to accept it. He's just accepting the Blair revolution in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which is far more feeble.
And that's what Blair did as well with all his stuff. This is just inevitable. Deal with it, peasants.
I don't know. I want reform to be good. Practical. Practically, most of us are going to end up voting for reform at the next general election, I suspect, because who the hell else are you going to vote for? But if they carry on their present course, even if they win the next election, they're going to be totally ineffective.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
they're just not going to be strong enough to do what they need to do.
Yeah, like you, I was supporting them. I voted for them in the last general election, and I was fully on board. But they've just been losing me, especially this past week of just all this crap. It's like Nigel's. Oh, you've been here 5 years. You're one of us. Okay, I mentioned, this guy's supposed to be the savior of the British people when he doesn't even know what we are. It's been really disheartening.
Yeah, 100%. I do 100% agree. I see Woodpit is saying that AA is on the low as Tory leader train. I'm sorry, I am not going to support anybody running the so-called Conservative Party, even if it was Rupert Lowe. I'm not going to support them. I'm sorry.
Rupert did say in an interview the other day that about 80% of the Tory MPs need to be purged.
Exactly.
So if he did somehow manage to get leader, and
doubt he would be able to do that, even if he did, though. I mean, honestly, if Rupert Lowe was leader and Jenrick was deputy leader, I still wouldn't trust him.
Oh, I don't know. I'd trust Rupert if he did that and he carried out a purge, that he could sell everyone on look what I've done to them. And that would be my choice. And I think because we're talking about, you mentioned about having the will to do stuff. I believe Rupert would, whereas Nigel, even if you're just talking about just deporting illegal immigrants, it's going to require people going round houses, bashing down doors, all this sort of stuff, setting up camps. I don't think Nigel has it in him to do that. Whereas Rupert, I think, does.
Agreed. What would be interesting to discuss is I don't know if everybody saw AA's video where he's saying that Rupert should join the Tories and take them over, and that's the only way we'll get results. What are people's thoughts on that? Personally, I think if Rupert was to join the Tories, I just think he'll be cut like Boris was. He won't be able to do anything base, and they'll just get rid of him after a couple of years.
Yeah, it's possible because I think, although I think Rupert is the kind of guy who, if he was allowed in, and then he finds he's just being blocked and everything, he would just leave and create a big fuss, which to damage the Tories even further.
I mean, it's a difficult one because Reform, it's quite clear Reform has no interest of actually doing anything. They just want, they're sort of just there to, manipulate the public. People who are like us who are concerned, who are concerned and want radical change to what's happening in our country, and they're not interested. They just want to, piss around and do, like a even shitter Tory version. Rupert Lowe joined the Tories because I saw that video. The only scenario where that could ever work is if literally the Tory party is reduced to, hardly any members, and Reform and Rupert Lowe being an MP, he coordinates with other people to join and takes over the Tory party when there's like literally no one there, and goes up for that way. But even still, I mean, the Tory party would never allow it to happen. They would literally do the Samson option than allow to anything like that to happen. So no, I just
one quick interruption though is one thing Aya did point out is the fact that Michael Gove interviews Lowe on The Spectator. So considering the context of that, it is interesting that they're at least prepared to talk to him, isn't it?
It is. I think that they would. I mean, knowing the Tories that I do, I would say that they will have a Gove generic tag team in Parliament, and then Gove. Sorry, they'll have a Rupert Lowe and generic tag team, and then they'll drop Lowe and sort of come up through that way. I mean, they understand. I mean, the thing is, take Gove. Now he was, I believe he was part of the Monday Club. He knew Jonathan Bowden. I believe Ed Dutton even contacted him for the book, and he remembered him. These people, the Tories, they're not clueless figures who don't understand how the situation on the right and everything. They do understand, but they just don't. They don't care. They are indifferent about this country. Rupert Lowe isn't. He actually does care, and he's willing to say stuff. And I mean, I would say Rupert Lowe. Maybe the Tories just see it because they see the public's positive reaction with Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe is completely in tune with the British public. Reform, none of those Muppets in Reform are at all. I mean, I think actually that I watched an interview today with Adam Curtis. He was on some left winger, like some Scottish left wingers podcast, and while Adam Curtis is left wing, and they have like this, like most Scottish and Irish left wingers, they have like this massive hard on for hating Thatcher, which sort of blinds them a bit. I mean, I get it, and maybe they do have a bit of a cause to do so, but it still blinds them in their analysis. But he does point out one thing in this interview. He says that Reform and Farage, the problem with Farage is he mentally exists, same with Richard Tice, in the year 2000. He's not, he hasn't caught up with politics, but you could say Trump, he is more aligned to the politics now, and so is Rupert Lowe. But Farage isn't. Farage is still behaving like like this is the year 2000.
One thing I'll say about the Thatcher, I think the problem with that is it's ethnic. Thatcher is English. The English fucking over Scotland, of course, they're going to have that opinion, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it was annoying watching that interview because it's just quite clearly like what was quite funny is they were talking about a confirmationist bias and being blinded by ideology, the Scottish chap, and then he goes straight back to Thatcher. It's really funny to see. And I think Adam Curtis, halfway through, he actually clocked on, and he didn't want to say it to sort of point it out and humiliate the guy, but he did like he did sort of he did sort of like hint at it. And then they got on to wrestling as well, talk about kayfabe, which is quite interesting. And as Darren Buckley says in chat, I mean, effectively, it does come down to understanding the kayfabe of the day. And Farage, he just hasn't got it. He hasn't got any charisma. I mean, he's good in debates. I will give Farage that. He is good when he's up against like an average Labour MP or average Tory MP. Bear in mind they're probably the most thickest animals on the planet.
Yeah.
He does well, but
With the what you're saying about the Tories, the question is with a lot of them, like Michael Gove, what's their real goal? Is it an actual dedication, like I believe with like Tyson stuff is, to this globalist neoliberalism, or are they just interested in power? And until now, they've been figuring that neoliberalism is the best way to get it. But if they sense that that's changing, then you could rely on them to just sort of go, oh, okay, we're actually nativist nationalists now, and they'll sort of ride that to get themselves back into power. So that's
I think
the question with them.
I can't remember where I read it, but someone said that Gold in the early 2000s was like banging the drum saying we need to reverse what Blair's done. And then by like 2005, when he actually gets into Parliament, he's had a full-on road to Damascus conversion to Blairism. He just took it to me. Oh well, we just have to see Blairism as inevitable, and we just have to ride this. So I'm wondering if the pendulum would swing the other way, would go
Exactly,
swing that way. Yes. It's like,
I think you've also, when you're looking at the so-called Conservative Party, in air quotes, they haven't really been a right-wing nationalist party since 1902, basically.
Yeah.
They just haven't.
I would also,
sorry. It's a long time. You've got to go back to like Lord Salisbury as Prime Minister for when the Conservatives were actually a right-wing, pro-British nationalist party. They haven't been since then. You've got to go back way over 100 years. So you're asking a lot for them to change.
I mean, just to add a bit, I mean, I talked with Aaron Hook on my channel the other week about the decline of the Liberals and the rise of Labour, and ultimately, ever since the 1920s, the Tory Party has just existed as a counter to Labour. We've got resistance to socialism and all that, and the national regeneration, and ultimately, that's what they've been since the 1920s. Just we're not Labour, and that's it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I'd also say, I don't know if anyone caught wind of Smart Slips going about Bleezy use of the phone question time. It's one thing where it's kind of one of those things where on one hand he's confident well spoken against the Farage, but at the same time it's like, well, you still can't really trust him simply because of the fact that why on earth would you want a Sri Lankan Muslim anywhere near power in this country? Like he could be a nice guy for all I know, even though I know several people don't like him, and some people in a Discord, me and family will say, "Oh, that's just because people don't like his style of managing things as well." He gets resolved, blah blah blah. It's like, well, it's like for example, if you get 100 people who dislike you, it's at that point where you go, okay, there clearly must be a problem with you.
Yeah, everyone, Mitch, is disliked by a few people. All of us, okay? But when you're disliked by 100 people, as you say, that might mean the problem is you, you know?
I have been wondering recently, because Zaire is often like, Nigel will say, oh, he's done so much work, he's done so much for the party. What has he actually done? Like they say, oh, he set up like the party branch structure. Okay, so you copy and pasted the basic party structure that everyone else uses. What
Which appears not working because people are like defecting on mass and it's all collapsing.
Yeah, they
And
just got. Yeah, all they've got is just like their councillors. Most of them, they're clearly just empty suits who thought, oh, I can.
I mean, you fail to see the bigger picture here. If Zia Yusuf wasn't there, British identity wouldn't exist anymore. It just wouldn't exist.
Indeed.
But,
I mean, look, all I would say is I'd just like an English dude to go to Sri Lanka and see how far he gets in Sri Lankan politics. I don't think he went anywhere.
Let's be honest, if a British guy took over Sri Lanka or India, I mean, the country would be wonderful to live in.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Yeah, but the point is they'd never, ever get any Sri Lankan to support them, because the Sri Lankans have a self-identity still, which apparently the British don't.
I think Survivor Job said about because he had like a great grandfather or someone who served in Ceylon, as it was known back then. And he just said, "Oh well, I think he made a joke, something along those lines, where on Twitter where he said, okay, well, if Zia Yusuf is going to be the chairman, then I might as well go back. I might as well go to Sri Lanka and try my luck there."
Well, I mean, as a historian, let me just remind people of the story of Fighting Mac, the brilliant Scottish Highlander dude who rose from private to major general, and who saved Kitchener's bacon at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898 by his brilliant handling of his Sudanese brigade. The thing that cooked Hector MacDonald, Fighting Mac's bacon, was some bloody Sri Lankan claiming he was gay. So Fighting Mac ended up blowing his brains out in a Paris hotel.
Yeah, it's one of the things where you do have because a lot of people say, for example, you try and look up Zia Yusuf's past, as Valium said. It's just like, for example, the guy's never been married. You can barely. I mean, apparently, he worked for Goldman Sachs like 10 years ago, but
the most globalist financial institution you could work for.
Yeah, there's nothing about who he is as an actual person.
Well, you say that. The Lotus Eaters did a video where they went over because he and a school friend of his founded a concierge service called Velocity Black after Zia left Goldman Sachs. And Sargon and the Lotus Eaters went through a load of reviews and they found that it's shit. It was crap. Like, people were like, I'm paying all this money and they don't do anything. They can't even book like restaurants for me or get any decent hotels. And, and apparently one of the people who reviewed it said, oh yeah, the guy who founded it said to me, oh, if you don't like the service, we'll give you a refund. And when I asked for a refund, he laughed at me and said, lol, okay, and didn't contact me again. So apparently, considering the ethnic background, those people, they love a good scam, don't they?
To me, it's just so obvious. I mean, Zia Yusuf, all right, he gave him, what was it, 200,000 quid. But that is not a lot of money in political terms.
No.
And to me, it was just so obvious. He was put there to be an ethnic minority face for reform so people wouldn't call them racist.
Yeah, it's like, for example, you got Aaron Banks, right? It's the one that Aaron Banks never became chairman because he knows how to handle the media. People say he's abrasive, but his kind of abrasiveness you can forgive because he actually does care about the country. Like that from what I've heard, Aaron Banks is generally all right. Like, he's quite. I think like back in the local elections, they tried to pin somehow him saying, "Oh well, apparently he wanted to do something about screw over the pensioners for favour of the young or something." When he just said, "Oh well, we can't subsidise the pensioners by taking off the young." So yeah, it's just back up. That's I don't know, kind of stuff that Aaron Banks does. So or I don't know, Andy Wigmore, or let's say I don't know. Trying to think who else. There's been a fair few people along the way who have been loyal to Farage, but Farage famously falls over with everyone, except you've got Gawain Taylor, who got sacked, and he just sticks around.
Yeah, I mentioned this the other day on the Discord, and it's something it's another thing that started bothering me, because that was sacking Gawain was one of the first things that Sire did when he came in. And like you said, Gawain is one of the only people who's actually been loyal to Nigel over all these years, not fallen out with him. And yet this new upstart comes along and fires him for no real good reason. And Nigel just goes along with that. Now, where's the loyalty from Nigel? I understand Zaya doing it because he wants to get rid of any competition to himself. But yeah, like, why would Nigel go along with that? Like, the reasonable thing would be to go, no, you don't. This is this is my friend. You're not sacking him.
Well,
but that didn't happen.
Therion, why would Nigel get rid of Rupert Lowe? I mean, a very popular and effective MP.
I can because Nigel started seeing him as a challenge, but Gawain obviously wasn't any challenge. This was just this new upstart guy says, "I want him gone," and Nigel goes along with it.
Yeah,
well, I
don't get that.
Sorry, but with Gawain Towler, it's even stupider because I remember Gawain gave an interview several months ago where he revealed that when he was part of UKIP and Nigel was leader of UKIP, they were giving details of UKIP members to Hope Not Hate to vet as members, which was... So I say to anybody who's thinking about reform, I get you may want to vote for them, but don't fucking join them, because who's to say they're not doing the same thing now? And I have to wonder if Gawain may have not shared that had he not been sacked from reform by Zia.
Well, I think
I was going to say Ant Middleton has also been. I don't know too much.
He's been ditched, hasn't he? Ant Middleton has been ditched, hasn't he? He's the guy who was going to stand for London Mayor.
Yeah, so I had to find out a lot of this on the internet because my local reform branch don't really know too much about Ant Middleton, so I don't follow him either. But from what I've heard, it's a matter of he's been talking a fair bit about bringing a new police force. He called it like the military guard or something to be set up in London if he were to become mayor. Because
he's an ex-soldier, so
it's just kind of that thing where so he's taken. So even somewhat Peter Hitchens will say, okay, well, we need a new police force because ours is just so rotten and you can't trust them. So we need a volunteer force. And apparently some people up in upper echelons of reform shat the bed going, oh, well, this guy was bringing some sort of British form of stormtroopers from like the 1930s. And they just
probably what they need in London, to be honest. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's just... it's just one of the things where you go, this is just another thing where you can't really think about reforms fully seriously. You go, okay, even somewhat Peter Hitchens will say you need a volunteer force to sort out the streets because the police are just about rotten. Even somewhat Peter Hitchens, who's not a fan of Nigel, will say that. And he said Nigel just buckled even at that.
Yeah, no, look, I'm not disagreeing with anything you guys are saying. I mean, like I said, I desperately hope reform will be good, but nothing I have seen over the past few weeks or months makes me think they will, to be honest. And as several people on the panel have said, Farage and the reform leadership seem to be totally out of touch with what average British people want. Most British people want a total end to mass immigration, both legal and illegal, and they want mass deportations. And Nigel has just set his face totally against that, which is incredible to me, frankly.
I mean, and they've got, it's not like they've got 4 years. They've got to try and keep this up. I doubt they've got it in them for that. Because this stuff will all just keep trickling out slowly, and yeah, I don't think he can keep it up for 4 years.
Yeah, it's not looking good. It isn't. But I mean, even if they do win the next general election,
nothing's going to happen.
They have no serious plans that I can see. And
was,
those that they do have seem piss weak.
Yeah, when Rupert Lowe did that interview before the council elections, that sort of got him kicked off. He was saying all these things like Reform have no policy, and like the people on Zaya's side go, "Oh, why you were lying? Why is he lying and attacking the party about this?" But that's true. Like, they've admitted it. Yeah, we should probably come up with some policy, and that all of the stuff in their sort of contract at the general election, Nigel just threw that all out. So they didn't have anything when Rupert was saying we need to be serious and get some policy. Yeah.
I just think if you seriously are a reform supporter right now, the best thing you could possibly do is to try and force the reform leadership to get real and realize it's 2025, not 1995. And, you've got to stop all mass immigration, legal and illegal, and you've got to do mass deportations. Because if you don't do those, Britain is bloody well sunk.
And I hear the arguments of, Farage can't come out with mass deportations because some people are saying like mass deportations is irrelevant to saying we need to deport Diane Abbott and David Lammy.
If only.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone actually views it that way. I think you just hear mass deportation just mean lots of people going. Which, if you're talking about getting rid of all illegals and stuff, is that not?
You're talking about getting rid of illegal immigrants, and there are at least 1 million of those, and more likely about 2.5 million. All of those should go because, by definition, they are criminals. They shouldn't be here. And above that, you've also got to get rid of all serious foreign criminals. As soon as they finish their prison sentences, they should be deported.
Yeah, but another thing is, another thing about reform is they get into just general. I mean, for example, you have Richard Tice, who said, "Oh, I'll be dead." I saw
that. He's younger than me. But I mean, does he have a son or a daughter, Mitch?
He's got 3 kids, yeah.
Well, then, what about them? What about them?
I would just say Richard Tice was born in '64, same year as Farage. So, I think he's older than you by year, Duke.
They're 1 year. They're 1 year. They're 1 year older than I am. But I've got a son. All right, sure, I'm not going to be around in 2060, of course not. But the point is, my son will be. Maybe his son will be.
Yeah. And then he goes to Stephen, why are you so obsessed with this? It's like, because it's Stephen's future. Stephen is unlikely to be dead by then, unlike you, Richard.
Yeah, Stephen. For reference, Stephen's only like a year old. He was born, he was a year older than me. So you factor, I'll be in my mid-60s.
Well, he's that young, bloody hell.
Yeah,
he is a pretty young chap. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because he never went to university. So.
I thought he was older than me.
But,
he was born
but the point is, anyone who is, I don't know, less than 40, let's say, or less than 45, is definitely going to be around in 2060 unless they're very unlucky.
I remember there's talk a while ago because we had like Theresa May, Angela Merkel and stuff, all these childless politicians across Europe, and just how bad that was because they don't have any personal stake in the future. Instead, they can just view like all immigrants as their kids, basically. But even with Tice, even when you've got your own kids, it doesn't matter. Wild.
That's just a disgusting position to me. It just is. You're
it's
supposed to hand something on to your to your children. You're supposed to.
Well, I mean, this is the legacy of that generation and that mindset. Everything is stolen, everything is universal, and they've internalized this. This is why they don't care.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes back to that thing. It goes back to that thing I mentioned about that unnamed chap. When they said, they'd be happy if the country was 95%, black, African, if they were all Christian. I mean, that's where that mindset comes from. They'd be happy with that.
Insanity. It's insanity.
I mean, yeah, it is total fucking insanity, and for some reason, people who are drawn to politics now, there's a lot of them with this sort of ridiculous fucking worldview. I don't get it. I actually think it's personally, those people should be locked up in asylums. I mean, they should be castrated and locked up in asylums so they can never breed again, and they can also never, they need to be removed from society because they are dangerous, and they can cause serious harm by indoctrinating people with their insane liberal cult ideas. I mean, it's insanity. And they have the fucking audacity to call us extremists in the sense of being too radical. You guys are insane. You want to literally replace the whole population. That's what Bond villains do.
Patriotism is terrorism, according to these guys.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are fucking Bond villains. You're talking about change. You're happy that everything's being replaced around you. You absolute psychopaths.
And yet they'll go on and do all the Second World War celebrations, and we held back the Germans, and at least we don't speak German. But yeah, all right, but we might be speaking Pakistani.
Well, if the Germans had been waving Union Jacks, then that would have been fine.
That would have been all right. Yeah. Well, actually, do you know what? I don't think that's true. Only if they'd have been homosexuals and brown. But
there is a brown shirt out there who was a homosexual. If that counts.
There were a number of them. There were a number, I know.
So speaking of Steve Edgington, I just looked him up, and you're right, Mitch. Yeah, he is that young. But I found out some deep lore about him. Apparently, he was the reason that the former British ambassador to America, Kim Darroch, was forced out, because he's the one who said the anti-Trump stuff, and then Trump wanted him gone. So, wow, that is some deep lore.
Interesting.
It's like I was talking earlier about, with some of the Tories, about if they're true believers or just care about power. Tice, I think Nigel, they are just true believers in this.
Wow.
They're stupid enough to
then they
believe
need to go, mate. Yeah. Then they need to go. They need to get out of the way for people who realise what day it is. But anyway, just before we go on, guys, I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, I would like to thank Girin, who sent us US $5. Thank you very much. And his message was just hello on Entropy. If you guys want to support the channel, or if you want to ask a super chat question that the panel will definitely answer towards the end of the stream, you can send us something on Entropy, and the link is pinned at the top of the chat, guys. And I do nowadays spend a fair amount of money on this channel to have unlimited streaming on StreamYards and also on X, because we stream on X live as well. So if you want to help us, it would be much appreciated. And thank you again to Garen, who quite often donates, by the way. There's that. What else was I going to say? I want to give a plug for our Wednesday history stream. Wednesday is the 18th of June, and we are going to do a stream on the Battle of Waterloo. And it's going to be a bit different because I am going to attempt to argue that Wellington would have won that battle without the Prussians. And even if Marshal Grouchy had marched to the sound of the guns, as Napoleon always said he should have, I still think Wellington would have won that battle. He wouldn't have been able to pursue the beaten French anywhere near as well as the Prussians were able to. But I still think he would have held his position and won. But we'll talk about that on Wednesday. And I'm quite looking forward to that stream because I've been reading about the Battle of Waterloo since I was quite a small child. So I know a fair bit about that. That's going to be our history stream on Wednesday, same time as this one started. Yeah, I think they were the main things I wanted to talk about. I've got two quick subjects myself, but before I do either of those, is there anything else anyone on the panel would like to speak about?
There's somebody in chat that just said that their boomer friend who used to be a diehard BNP supporter then did a complete about turn and is now gleeful about the demise of the UK. That's unusual. How do you go from like the sort of blue pill, circle?
As the saying goes, there are no based boomers.
I mean, basically, yeah. Sort of
Well, there
right,
are some. I mean, I'm almost a boomer, and I don't have anything in common with these people.
Next, you'll tell us, Dominus, that you'll the diehard boomer BNP supporter actually sat in on like many speeches by Bowden and just like just went over the head completely, just totally wasted on him.
I will say there's a guy in my town who used to be part of the BNP, and now he's transgender.
Bloody hell.
Oh no. Well, that's just the far right to tranny pipeline, isn't it?
Yeah. And what's funny is he sends Austrian painter themed birthday cards to all his old BNP mates.
Oh my god. Well, the curse.
I just think it's strange the number of supposed right-wing people who are gay and transgender and what have you. It's always been a bit of a mystery to me.
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I think there's a bit of a situation with some people where they just want to be the most despised thing they can. And at the moment they think, okay, far right Nazi, that's one. Gay, transgender, that's one. Then you also get some who go, okay, this is enough. I'm going to be all of that and a furry. Just goes on from there.
That is true because that is Kanye West. That's Kanye West in one go. He does that, and I mean, I hate to say this on YouTube here, but I think should we gatekeep Hitler a bit because I mean his all these like freaks and stuff are sort of co-opting him at this point. It's kind of like I think we have to sort of like draw it back a bit now. It's getting out of control.
But AI, Hitler was a left winger. He was a vegan. He loved animals. He cried a lot.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good if the freaks claim Hitler because then it's harder to use it against us. We're the normal people.
The thing that annoys me, Therium, is that I am no sort of neo-Nazi. None at all. Right?
Yeah.
I don't like Churchill, but that doesn't make me a neo-Nazi, because I don't like Churchill because I think he made Britain's position worse than it was before he came to power. And as a war leader, he was pretty shit, quite honestly. Look at the number of British soldiers and sailors who were killed by him and his stupid decisions. But, that's my objection to Churchill, not, but whatever.
Yeah, I will say there's a certain guy that AI and Valium and all of us are aware of who was saying, Rupert Lowe message replying to Morgoth.
Yeah.
and said Morgoth is somehow a neo-Nazi. And I mean, Morgoth, for example,
News to me that Morgoth's a neo-Nazi. I've had him on this stream quite a few times, and he doesn't strike me as a
No, but Iron
neo-Nazi at
Duke,
all.
he was demonized by Hope Not Hate. You must believe Hope Not Hate, right?
Oh yeah, I love those guys. An extreme left-wing government-funded group. Hope Not Hate. Yeah, right.
He went to that extremist terrorist training camp called the Witan, didn't you know?
Yeah, and he does videos about ancient British oak trees. Terrible, man.
You know, he's named after Morgoth, the source of all ancient evil in Tolkien's Middle-earth, so of course you can't trust him.
Oh, don't take James Lindsay that. He'd be another like Zarathustra, fucking Zoroastrian.
Trying to
spurg
summon
out.
demons. They're trying to summon demons. I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh man! All right, guys, we're over 2 hours now, so I want to raise 2 quick points of my own and let the panel discuss them. The first one is that everyone knows about Starmer, and I never thought I would have to say this. The British Foreign Secretary David Lemmy, one of the stupidest men in Britain. We all know they've been trying to give away the British Indian Ocean territory, which is a very important base, often used by the Royal Navy, by the way. We all know about that, but they're also trying to give away Gibraltar now on the quiet, keeping it very, very quiet, but they're trying to give away Gibraltar, which Britain got in perpetuity, which means forever for anyone who doesn't understand English, from Spain. It's British in perpetuity, and on the occasions, and there have been several, when they've done referendums in Gibraltar, the Gibraltarians have voted about 98 or 98.5% to stay British. And traitor Starmer and scumbag Lemmy are trying to give this place away, and they're doing it very quietly at the moment. So I wonder what the panel have to say about that.
Well, they're traitors, but one thing I say about David Lammy is rather than saying, the British Foreign Secretary, why don't you just say the African currently occupying the position of Foreign Secretary in the government of the United Kingdom?
Yep. 100%, mate. Yeah, I agree totally.
What do you expect? They want to give what they can to the EU and just sell us out and further weaken Britain's and the idea of Britain owning territory that's not outside the British Isles, that's completely anathema. I mean, even Britain owning sovereign territory in the British Isles is anathema. So the thought of even outside the British Isles is even more unthinkable to these people. So here we are.
I'd also just point out that there's there's a very useful naval base on Gibraltar, which the Royal Navy very often uses, like going to and from the Gulf, going to and from the Far East, going to and from the South Atlantic. Yeah. Gibraltar is a very useful base for that.
It's been a key strategic military position since the beginning of recorded history.
Yes, it controls the entrance to the Mediterranean, basically. So,
it's one of the 2 pillars of Hercules. Like, this is a prize, like, throughout all history. It's an incredible prize, and we just want to give it away.
So, this disgusted me, and this only came up this week, and there's not been a lot of speaking about it. No. But to me, and like I said, the overwhelming vast majority of Gibraltarians want to stay British. They don't want to be part of Spain. They never have.
The guy in charge is called Fabio, isn't he, at the moment?
I think so.
Fabian Picardo, who is a leftist.
Yeah, there should never be anyone with a Spanish name in charge of Gibraltar. It's just got to be
the thing is that, from my understanding,
didn't Carl Benjamin try and pick a fight with him like a couple of years ago, several years ago?
No, it's in 2019 during the European elections. Yeah, he was like, Fabian, you Oxford-educated twat.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I also think it's ironic. You've got Starmer using the British Crown bases, which are British territory on Cyprus, to defend Israel. He hasn't given those away yet, but he's trying to give away everything else.
Well, when we see David Lammy's planning a trip to Argentina, we know what's coming next.
Oh, yeah. Look, let's be clear. The very moment that Starmer said he was going to give away the British Indian Ocean territory, the Chagos Islands, you had the Argentinians and the Spanish saying, well, the Spanish were saying we want Gibraltar, and the Argentinians were saying we want the Falkland Islands, where hundreds of British soldiers and sailors and airmen were killed taking them back.
I wouldn't. I know that one of the positions that's been argued for with the Falkland Islands is that Argentina is given West Falklands and the British hold East Falklands. I would honestly not be surprised if Starmer does that.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, loves Israel so much that Starmer will just give it away, because you see, we're helping Israel by giving Argentina the Falklands, because Milei loves Israel so much. You see, we're helping Israel.
Traitor.
I'm just gonna load up Mountain Blade, and I'm just gonna join the Vespasian campaign mod that I've got here. I'm so angry. I just have to load that up every now and then. It fucking pisses me off.
Well, I think we can all agree that Sir Keir Starmer is a traitor, and so are all of the Labour Party, basically. The final point I wanted to bring up, and another bill that Labour are trying to put through on the quiet, is to allow abortion up to the day of birth in Britain.
I saw that as well, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, very quiet, no publicity on the mainstream media. And Labour are trying to put this through where you could actually murder a baby on the day it was due to be born.
Yeah, the main MP trying to shoehorn this is Stella Creasy, who started talking about it while she was still pregnant with her child a few years back.
Wow.
How dare you not let me murder my own child? We're so uncivilized.
And given what we've been speaking about for most of this stream, I have yet to see Nigel Farage or anyone else in Reform talk about Gibraltar or about this abortion bill. Not a word.
I will say that Farage mentioned about abortion. He would restrict the date, times, or something. I can't remember what he said, but yeah.
But to me, I think it would be perfectly reasonable to restrict abortion to 12 weeks, because if a woman doesn't know she's pregnant by 12 weeks, what's her bloody problem,
Mm-hmm.
I would just do want to say about the whole Falklands thing, that ever the sunglasses on the Falkland Islands. Never forget Israel was arming Argentina throughout the war. Interesting, isn't it? Because the Falklands War was 1982, precisely the same time that Israel was invading Lebanon. So, even though you're fucking invading your northern neighbour, you still decide to send arms halfway across the fucking world.
Yep, absolutely true. I know that the Argentinians were trying to get Exocet missiles from the Israelis, for sure. I just can't believe how traitorous Starmer and the Labour Party are. I really can't. And how they have no morals whatsoever. And they show that by, we're going to allow babies to be murdered on the same day they'd be born, which is just incredible to me.
Well, as you know, with birth rates, that it tends to be women of a certain British background that tend to have abortions, and the minorities don't. So that's entirely the reason why they're allowing this, Iron Duke. So,
yeah,
maybe. I mean, do you know what this problem is? And we have been too generous on fuck ugly women. We've been too generous as a society.
Based.
And as a result, we have these absolute barnyard animals representing women in all levels of society, and this has to stop. This has to stop now.
A few states in America have got this up till birth abortion limits as well. They've introduced that.
Yeah, lefty states.
Yeah,
but they're very lefty states. But I
Yeah,
didn't
of course,
think I did. As far as I knew, there was no pressure in Britain for that to happen
No,
at
there's not.
all.
Because even the people who are generally in favor of abortion, if you say right up till like is up till birth, that does start like making some of them get a bit uneasy.
Well, it's baby murder, basically.
Exactly, and even like these ones that it's hard for them to sort of. You can't really use the excuse, oh, it's just a group of cells, when give it an hour and it's going to be born.
Yeah, and it's legalizing baby murder. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Iron Duke, it's a white baby, and so it's okay if it gets murdered because it's it's racist and imperialist, and we can't let it live.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, guys. Any final thoughts?
I think in New York City, 50% of all pregnancies are aborted, which is just a huge amount.
I've got an even worse statistic. I remember a stat, like 2019 Florida, there was something like 50,000 abortions in that state alone in that year. And I was like, that forever changed my opinion on abortion after I read that stat. I was like, and the thing is, 98% of the abortions, no reason was given.
Yeah.
50,000 abortions with no fucking reason.
Yeah, I remember reading something like, I think it was like in America, something like 60% of all black babies get aborted.
Yeah, it's very high there. Yeah.
Well, that's the reason that abortion was legalized to begin with, if you believe the activists who pushed for it.
The Planned Parenthood was
indeed.
Yeah.
One thing I can't stand, particularly, and this is the very big Americanism, is the American left and liberals will jump to the most insane circumstances of why abortion needs to happen. And usually it's like, well, what happens if like the father rapes the daughter or the brother rapes the son or whatever, and this triggers this, and it's like, oh, okay, be realistic. How often, how frequent is that?
Yeah,
and no one argues against abortions in those circumstances. In any case,
I remember I saw one of the American TV like CNN or MSNBC. One of their commentators thinking they were being really smart because she's going, well, if you're going to force women to have babies, then maybe we should just force the fathers to look after them as well. Okay, your terms are acceptable. Yeah. This is fine.
Yeah, have a word with the family. Have a word with family courts before you talk about that.
This just these people, they just do not understand like conservatives in the slightest. They think anti-abortion is just because we hate women and we want to like punish them into like.
Oh, sure.
With motherhood.
I've never heard anyone on the right arguing against abortion in the case of incest or some poor woman who was raped by a stranger. Yeah. I've never heard anyone on the right argue against that at all.
Even the people who are very anti-abortion, they will concede. You know what? Sometimes like this, we can have conversations. They're not extremist, unlike there's leftists who are up till birth. In fact, actually, maybe even a bit after birth, in case you change your mind.
Oh yeah, there are certainly leftists who argue you should be able to kill the baby after it's been born. There are. It's incredible to me.
Yeah, some states in America allow something called double kill abortions, where if the doctor fails to abort the child, they have to then kill the baby that's been born early.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. And there's all these horror stories from Planned Parenthood where like the abortion's failed, so the baby's been delivered and is alive and screaming and needs medical help, and they just lock the door, do nothing, wait for it to die.
Wow.
I mean, even the name of Planned Parenthood is an abomination. It's like it's a euphemism. It's
I mean, not to go down this very morbid route here as we've got into in this heavy topic, but if applying this to the UK, like especially on like babies that are in a force of like come from incest and are retarded in that regard. It would be we would be targeting a certain demographic in Northern England quite heavily.
Indeed.
Quite heavily. And
Indeed.
now I'm not a I won't go there. I won't go there. But
AI, we could also talk about honor murders and things like that, but obviously we can't because we're on YouTube. But
But the thing is, AI is that those people are not going to have an abortion now, are they? Because it's against their culture and their their lifestyle.
I remember abortion was something I never really thought about growing up. Just wasn't relevant to me at all until. But I was just took the default position of it's fine because that's just the default position these days. Except until one day I was talking to this girl and she was saying she was planning a night out, getting pissed and drunk and partying, and she said, "And if I get pregnant, I'll just have the thing flushed out." And something about that, it just like felt just wrong in my stomach, like on a gut level.
And let's be honest, Therium, let's be honest, right? The pill has been around for a long time. And even the morning after pill has been around quite a long time. I mean, are women supposed to take no responsibility whatsoever?
No, of course not.
Well, no, because they're encouraged to be whores. I mean, I'm sorry, but someone has to say it. Women need to stop being whores. They just behave like whores. They get upset when you treat them like whores.
AI, some women. Let's be fair. Not all
some women, but those very same ones you meet out in Friday, Saturday night in town centre, will be the first first ones to demand such things. I remember last time I went out, like in a proper like all night bender sort of stuff, in York. It was in York. I remember seeing several women that were so heavily intoxicated, they basically vomited all over the street and would on the floor been carried off in ambulances which were parked up.
I've seen that. Yeah, no, I've seen that. Yeah, for sure.
Sounds like a typical Saturday night in modern Britain, but hey,
class acts.
Yeah.
Some of these
what you were saying about these the ugly women, this is really the leftist thing because they want all the attractive women to cover up. They've got to be in burqas, whereas all the fat ugly ones, it's good for them to be whores. They're what we've got to find attractive. So it's the most miserable world.
I mean, you see, I mean, one thing I have great respect for Harvey Weinstein in some regards is that he was a bulwark against ugly women.
On YouTube.
He was a bulwark against ugly women in film, and I respect him for that. I respect him for that more than ever.
Harvey Weinstein, champion gatekeeper of the film industry.
Look, I'll be honest, right? I do not in any way, shape, or form support Harvey Weinstein. But you know what? Most of those women knew exactly what they were doing.
Oh yeah.
And they were doing it for money, and they were doing it for fame and money. So
I mean,
he took advantage of us.
I do support Harvey Weinstein because I mean, let's be honest, his films on the Regency period were pretty cool. But, I mean, let's be honest.
He produced a lot of good films, including one of my favorites, Master and Commander. So
that
was him.
Yeah.
There was no women in that though.
He produced Master. He was the producer. He wasn't the director or anything like that.
He also produced all
his
of the
company
Territorial
produced
films.
a lot of good films. So, and I'm sorry, these Hollywood actresses who he supposedly exploited, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they were doing it for fame and money.
I like how Oprah would funnel women into him as well, and then she acts all, I had no idea. Sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
sorry,
I
just-
never knew about this for the last 10 years. Of course you didn't. No.
You got military theorists. True. Weinstein wouldn't even great Zendaya. Oh, can you imagine? Oh God.
What about that one in that I see in The Last of Us? That adaptation from that
Oh,
video
yeah.
game, The
with
Last
those
of
funny
Us.
eyes.
Bella
the funny eyes.
Ramsey.
Yeah, Bella
Yeah.
Ramsey. That's it.
Yeah.
The potato head looking thing. Yeah, yeah.
It's all because this is the weird thing about that show, because her and Pedro Pascal, they were both in Game of Thrones, so it's like, well, you're in Game of Thrones now. I guess we've got to
God.
put you in everything.
I think
what I
there
can
are some
see-
people with Bella
I
Ramsey.
can't
Though,
stand Pedro Pascal, but anyway, yeah.
with Bella Ramsey, there are people with a bit of a fetish for like the Downsy look. Apparently,
Is it Down syndrome, or is it like the mother drinking too much alcohol and smoking?
Bella Ramsey is more fetal alcohol syndrome. But
Yeah,
what they have,
yeah.
there's this spin-off of OnlyFans called Only Downs, where normal women are using AI face
Oh
filters
God.
to make it look like they've got Down
No,
syndrome
no.
and doing the normal OnlyFans content.
No, please.
And some of them are making a lot of money.
Yeah, I think.
Oh my God.
With Pedro Pascal, right? So apparently he says he suffers from anxiety, so he has to constantly hold a woman's hand in public.
Oh,
Oh.
Yay. We live in a, as Nietzsche said, we live in a world where God is dead.
I'm
tell
just
you
going to
what-
say to Obsidian fan in the chat, there is actually a woman in Master and Commander, and she's on the boat that comes out from Brazil bringing them supplies. And Captain Aubrey is looking at this cute young girl, and then you hear in the background the bosun shouting at one of the ordinary sailors, "Put that woman down, slave!" So, there is actually one woman in Master and Commander.
I mean, quite rightly if you say. I mean, what are you, Spanish? Put that woman down. You're an Englishman.
Well, I'm sure that's not what they meant, but yeah, all right. But you have the famous Royal Navy song from the Napoleonic Wars, which I have played on here a number of times, Spanish Ladies. So,
Well, I guess
Wait,
you would have to be the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
You always, in the service,
I-
you always pick the lesser of two evils. Yes.
I mean, I've just realised you couldn't make a Roman. I've got Total War up on the other screen here. I'm just thinking to myself, you couldn't make like a film about Caligula, like trying to make Nero, trying to make like an insane emperor, because everything they do is quite.
You did get a Caligula film back
yeah,
in
I
the
was going to say
70s.
they did. Do that.
Speaking of that AI, I've actually recently been rewatching I, Claudius, and obviously Caligula's in that, and he's crazy and insane. So
You can find that you can find I, Claudius on YouTube, by the way, if you look for it.
My point is, compared to like people today, like we just list off like all this like insanity in the last 10, 15 minutes. Is Caligula really that mad compared to what's now going on?
Yeah, good point.
Your point about the people who call us extremists when we're just normal for all history.
Yeah. I mean, I as people will know, I am the biggest Caligula stan probably on the planet. I honestly believe he is the best Roman emperor, and I think there's a lot of like.
I wouldn't agree. I'd say it had to be Trajan or maybe Marcus Aurelius, but all right. Anyway,
Yeah.
all right.
Well, from a certain perspective, he completely sabotaged his conquest of Britain by bringing back shells as booty. So, if you don't want Britain being conquered by the Romans, I guess he's based.
I mean, really, listen to Hitman. Caligula was a great social scientist.
The social science of incest.
Oh yes, that as well. I mean, I would admit, I do hit back against certain things like, that history tells. I do think on that instance, I don't think that was made up by his enemies. I think he actually probably did do that with his sister, but both sisters actually.
Possibly.
I do think he's guilty of that because it does appear to be the case. But
yes, Caligula was based because he was a sensitive young man.
I mean, come on, making your horse a senator, that for me, that seals the deal.
I was going to say I do approve of how he treated politicians. We could
Yeah,
do something.
Well, there is that. Yes, yes, there is
also
always that.
like taking their wives. I mean, that's just pure Saddam energy right there. That's Saddam Hussein energy right there. You know.
I don't know. Would you want most of their wives? I'm not sure. I mean, maybe they were cuter back then, but I mean, yeah.
Oh well, if I know anything from my callers about senators, is they love to shag the emperor's daughter. Has there anyone of you who has not slept with my daughter?
Yeah.
All right, guys. We've gone almost 2.5 hours. Hitman, anything you would like to plug, sir?
Yes, there's my series on modern Iran, which I'm doing with my good friend Hunger the Dye Merchant. So stay tuned for that. The next episode should be the end of this month. We'll be discussing the Zand dynasty and the rise of the Qajars. And also next Tuesday, as part of my archival discourses stream, I'll be having Melon and Micah Pole on to discuss millennial culture. So stay tuned for that.
Cool. And that's on your channel, which is called Hitman, isn't it, mate?
Well, Hitman 14494.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll put a link to your channel in a pinned comment after the stream anyway. Therium, anything you would like to plug?
Nope, nothing from me. Thank you for having me.
Mitch?
I plugged Rupert Lowe's PDF about his deportations plan earlier. Otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter, which I've
What's your
become
handle
a lot
on
more
Twitter,
active
Mitch?
on there recently compared to what I was, like, say, a month ago. So if people want to follow.
What's your handle on Twitter, Mitch?
I'll type it in chat.
Let me see if that shows. If it doesn't, you can put it in private chat and I'll put it up. Yeah, it's shown. Cool. AI, would you like to plug anything, sir?
Not particularly. No, I would say go check out the Dominic Cummings interview with Edgington on GB News. That was a 30-minute one. It's a really good one. And also the Rupert Lowe interview with Gove. That's quite an interesting one as well.
Okay, and you can also find AI on AI Anglo Homelander, I believe, is his channel these days.
Yes, that's right.
We will be back on Wednesday for our history stream, and this is going to be a stream about the Battle of Waterloo on Waterloo Day. So there you go. That should be good. I'm looking forward to that one. I hope some of these gentlemen will join me for that. And I think we'll also have Aaron. By the way, just in case people wondered, I did, of course, send Aaron a link for the stream, but he's obviously busy. So there we go. All right, I am going to attempt to play us out with a tune, if I can do so. See if it works, you never know. Okay, that was The Campbells Are Coming, which is a traditional Scottish tune, and it's one of the marches, or was one of the marches, of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. And the photograph was the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders in South Africa during the Anglo-Boer War. Thank you very much to my guests this evening, Hitman, Tharium, Mitch, and AI. And I will put appropriate links under the stream. Let me just have a quick check. Oh, good. Thank you very much to Sheev Palpacringe for US $3. And he says, hello, is me, Sheev Palpacringe. I have heard in the Northern Irish riots that the girl that got raped might have had a relative who is a high-ranking member in a paramilitary group. But that I see post-timeline. So I don't know if anyone has anything to say to that super chat from Sheev Palpacringe. Thank you again. Anything to say, gents, about that?
It's possible.
It certainly is possible.
It would explain the coordination with the rioting, because it seems to me, I was watching some of it the other day, and the crowd, distracted the police on one street, then went running to another area completely. So I can believe that, but I mean, of course, this was Ian Paisley. This was like the UVF territory and the UDA and all the other sort of like paramilitary groups for the Protestant side. So many Americans, so many fucking American accounts were going, look at Ireland and with the tricolour, and it's like, oh, buddy, if you went there with the tricolour,
it's also because this isn't the first girl it's happened to, and so it could be like that's you got someone with some clout behind it, rather than if it's just some ordinary nobody teenage girl who gets raped.
Yeah, and there's a lot more organisation in Northern Ireland in regard to that stuff than there is anywhere else in Britain. So entirely possible. And frankly, if that's what happened, I don't bloody well blame them, to be honest. Although, of course, we do not support violence in any way, shape, or form.
Also, the other point about like this being Ian Paisley's lot. Of course, Sinn Féin are now firmly on the new Irish side of things.
Oh yeah, the Sinn Féin, Sinn Féin, which is the political wing of the Provisional IRA, are entirely Brits out, Somalians in.
Wild.
They're completely anti the real Irish people. Surprise. But
our policy position on rape is that we are pro-rape.
Well, no.
You're saying Sinn Féin is
Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA. That wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you. I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland with the British Army, and I saw some pretty disgusting stuff from Sinn Féin, to say the least.
Anyway. The Irish Republic, the land of papists and rapists.
Well, again, we're on YouTube, AI, and also I have some Irish ancestry myself, and there are many very good Irish men and women. There are, but whatever. So anyway, I think we've covered a lot of ground this evening. Again, thank you to my guests, Hitman, Tharium, Mitch, and AI. Can't do the stream on my own. It's excellent that we get good guests every week. We'll see you on Wednesday for our Waterloo Day stream, and in the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down.